Hello everyone, welcome back to a new video. Today we will be discussing the 2024 House elections and just seeing whether it goes Republican or Democrat and why it's most likely to go Republican. So yeah, let's just get into it. So currently 2024 is shaking up to be a pretty competitive race on the presidential level, but a lot of people, they've mostly talked about the presidential election and aren't really focusing on the side things that do matter, like the Senate or the House of Representatives, especially. And currently, the map that we have here shows a relatively split race, and Republicans still have the edge. They are still closer to that 215 margin that you need to win. And Democrats, they have a lot of ground to make up. And if they want to win the actual House again, then they're going to have to make up quite a bit of ground. And definitely the top of the ticket is going to be affecting a lot of these races. So we're just going to go on a state by state basis. First up, we got Alabama. Nothing here to change. Alaska. Now, this prediction has Alaska as a lean blue. I think it might actually go tilt red. They might have a narrow flip just because top of the ticket, Republicans are putting up a much better candidate than they did last time, and generally they're focusing on winning Alaska a lot more than they did in previous years, and it's kind of like the Ted Cruz situation where you have a bad election one year and you focus on it and you funnel way more resources into it and actually, care about it, and generally, Democrats aren't really, doing that well in Alaska. And generally, Republicans, they've had the edge for quite a while. And Republicans, as long as they keep their current track record of just funding their candidates and promoting their candidates in Alaska, then they should be good. And this should be a narrow flip. Narrow because it's the presidential election. If this was midterms, then they would probably win it by around a lean margin. But since it's the presidential election, a lot of down ballot voters and a lot higher turnout, it's still going to be pretty competitive. So, next state we got is Arizona. So, Arizona, we got two toss up seats right here. I think both of them are going to be tilt Republican, and you got a rhino in Arizona's 6th district, which that might actually help him given the district that he's in and might appeal to those mid-cane types. The 1st district, also, you got enough Republicans there that you kind of got a decent floor. A lot of Republicans in Arizona, they usually have their relatively high floor, same with Democrats, and it's the same in a lot of these House races, and generally, Republicans have the edge in terms of their peer base, and Democrats are not putting up the greatest candidates to unseat the Republicans, and the Republicans are running as the incumbent, so they have a lot of advantages, and it's still going to be tight, but there is generally a much higher probability of Republicans retaining the seats than Democrats flipping them, especially in a presidential year. So, next state, what do we got? We got Arkansas. Arkansas, we have no changes. They're all going to go safe red. California, we got a few changes. So currently, we got quite a few of these elections up for grabs, and the 13th district, that is probably going to go to the Democrats. There's a lot of overperformers in these House districts that overperform the presidential margin by around 13 to 15 points. But the 13th district is just a little bit too Democrat, and the candidate is just not as strong as the other ones, and he's definitely a lot less secured in his seat. Now, the other California districts, Republicans should have a pretty easy time winning these. It's still funnel resources into winning these, but they're definitely a lot more safe than the 13th district. And honestly, 13th district, it just has to do with the voters and where they live in California. You could technically maybe see a shot of Republicans retaining the 13th seat, but it's going to be fairly hard given the current environment. So Republicans, they do lose a seat in California, but definitely not as bad as what they were at in 2020. So next state, Colorado. Now, Colorado, this should be a Republican flip, but unfortunately, Democrats, they've just been doing way too well there. It's going to be a tight margin like last time, but Democrats are still going to retain the seat. It's kind of bordering on lean because Democrats, they just do very, very well there, and they've been doing well there for quite a while. It's basically just a Democrat Florida, and really, it's going to be very hard to actually make gains in the state for now. Maybe in the future, Republicans will make some gains in the state and maybe trend the state towards the Republicans, but right now, currently, Democrats still have the edge. So next state we got is Connecticut. Connecticut, pretty much all safe blue outside of the 5th district, but that's still going to go Democrat. Delaware, nothing to change. Florida, beautiful red map, but really nothing to change. But maybe we put the 23rd district in lean because it's definitely going to be a lot more competitive. And outside of that, you don't really need to change anything. Next, we got Georgia, nothing to change there. Hawaii, nothing to change. Idaho, nothing to change. Illinois, 17th district is probably going to be a lot more competitive this time, but I still generally agree with lean Democrat. Outside of that, all the other seats are in their respective columns and nothing's changing. Indiana, I think this might actually be a closer race and it might actually be able to flip. The first district has gone a lot more Republican, and Republicans actually do pretty well there in the presidential election. And given the fact that it's a presidential election, Republicans will continue making gains there, and Democrats, because it's the presidential election, they might stop Republicans actually flipping the seat. Because if it was like the midterms, Republicans would flip the seat. But because there's a lot higher turnout, and Democrats are going to definitely have a lot higher turnout, it kind of just equals out to Democrats nearly retaining the seat, but it still is very prime for a future flip for Republicans, and Republicans should definitely look to flipping in the future. But right now, I just don't think that it's actually ready to flip. Not quite, but maybe in the future, maybe 2026. So Iowa, we got that next. Nothing to change here. Generally agree with all these. Kansas, nothing to change. Kentucky, nothing to change. Louisiana, they got that diversity district, and that's going to go safe blue. It might be likely, but generally, because it's basically just drawn to give Democrats a free district, it's going to be hard to keep it in the likely column, so it's probably going to go safe. Maine, now, the second district, it's kind of a weird thing where Republicans win it by massive margins in the presidential election, but the House election, Democrats have the edge, and I don't think that it's going to be a massive win for Democrats in the state. They're going to barely hold on to it, and really, this is the most likely seat to flip. Considering how it's a presidential election, definitely a lot more likely to flip than if it was the midterms, but I think Democrats might still hang on to the seat. Now, if it was drawn a lot more favorably towards the Republicans, like getting rid of some of the coast on the second district, it might be flippable, but it's just way too fickle and doesn't really fall in line with the presidential election, unlike a lot of these seats. And because of that, Democrats are probably going to retain it. And then next state, we got Maryland. Generally agree with all these. 6th district might be a lot closer this time, but still not going to flip. Massachusetts, all blue. Michigan, now we got some interesting seats here. Trump is probably going to do well in the 8th and 7th district, and that might be able to carry Republicans across the finish line. And Democrats are kind of falling in the 8th and 7th district, but Republicans are making massive gains there. And generally, Democrats have outweighed losing the 8th and 7th district by making gains in the 3rd district and making gains on the west side of Michigan. And generally, the more rural area is definitely going to go a lot more Republican this time than previous years, but those urban parts of Michigan just aren't as Republican anymore. But Republicans still will have the one district in Detroit. Outside of that, Republicans will actually get the majority in Michigan's House district, so that's good if elections go to the House. But even with these seats flipped, and we haven't even gotten to the other 13 toss up seats, Republicans have the majority already. They already have 217, so Republicans are going to get the majority. We just need to see how large they get it by. And Republicans, even if Trump wins by a little bit or even loses by a little bit, Republicans are still going to retain the House. Democrats need to have a gigantic night where they just pull out all the stops, because if they don't, Republicans are still going to maintain the House and the Senate, and you can't pass anything. So, Michigan, we got that. Next state is Minnesota. Generally agree with all these. Second district just isn't ready to flip at this point. It's definitely a lot more Democrat favorable than previous years, and outside of that, Republicans made massive gains over the past few years in rural Minnesota, but Minneapolis is just way too much of a stronghold to actually flip the second district or the seats there. Then you got Mississippi, nothing to change. Missouri, nothing to change. Montana, nothing to change. First district is looking relatively Republican. Now, Nebraska, second district, Don Bacon is probably going to hang on despite Democrats being fairly likely to win the second district. It's going to be a lot closer this time than in 2020, so that kind of helps Don Bacon get over the finish line, and generally he outperforms the presidential margin by decent amounts, and it's definitely a lot more Republican favorable than previous elections, and Don Bacon should have a relatively good shot at winning the seat. But next state, what do we got here? Nevada. Let me get to that. Nevada. Now, are the fourth and third district going to go likely Democrat? No, they're going to be a lot closer. You could have a potential flip if Trump does very well in the state, and I wouldn't be too particularly shocked if, say, the fourth or third district actually flipped a Republican if Trump does amazing there. But right now, I think Democrats will still retain the exact same margin. It might change as we get closer to election day, but right now, Democrats are still going to have the edge, just given the way that the map is drawn. And next state, what we got? We got New Hampshire. Now, agree with this map, nothing to change. New Jersey, I think Republicans are still going to hang on to the 7th district. Trump has done a lot better in Pennsylvania in recent weeks and months, and Republicans have maintained a relatively good floor for their House seats and the Senate or stuff like that. And the 7th district is definitely a lot more Republican favorable, and you don't have Joe Biden on the ticket where he has a lot more appeal there in the 7th district. So, generally, due to the down ballot effects, Republicans are going to be able to retain the 7th district. Not by a lot, but enough to maintain the district. So, next we got right here. We got New Mexico. New Mexico, I think the 2nd district might actually flip back towards Republicans. It's definitely a lot more Democrat favorable than previous years, but Republicans still have a relatively decent base in the 2nd district. The 1st and 3rd district, absolutely not, but 2nd district is definitely a lot more competitive. They're not going to win it by that much, but Republicans don't have a completely garbage candidate, and Democrats don't have a electoral juggernaut, so 2nd district can flip Republican. It's kind of just a 50-50 odds whether or not it goes Republican or Democrat. Republicans do have the edge, just given the fact that, looking at the county map, definitely a lot more Republican support there, but things could change, and Hispanic trends in the state definitely benefit Republicans. So, next state, what do we got? We got New York. Now, New York, we got a lot of seats to talk about, and a lot of these seats are actually going to go Republican. The 22nd district, that's going to be a flip, and it's just because of how the map is drawn. I think Republicans are actually going to maintain the 19th, 17th, and especially the 4th district. It's not going to be by quite a bit, but it's still going to be by a relatively decent amount. And I don't think that Democrats are going to win the 18th district by a lean margin. I think it's going to be a lot more competitive because it's definitely drawn a lot more Democrat favorably, but Republicans are definitely doing a lot better in upstate New York than they have in previous years, and definitely a lot closer this election, but still, it's going to be decided on relatively small margins. So next state, we got North Carolina. Now, North Carolina, Republicans definitely have a lot more favorable map, and they are going to pick up a ton of seats here. And the first district, it's actually quite far to the right, and I think Republicans might actually flip the seat. And it's definitely a lot more Republican favorable now, just because of trends and just how it's drawn. Republicans definitely have a better shot at flipping the seat and expanding on their margins and gains that they've made in previous years. Republicans are going to make quite a few gains in North Carolina, which is going to help them win the House just because it kind of bounces out the diversity districts in the South and just Democrats gaining a lot of these flimsy seats. But North Carolina is kind of going to save Republicans and let them keep the House. So, Ohio, we got two toss ups. Now, we are dealing with quite a few Democrat juggernauts that really keep their seats despite them being in competitive and I think Democrats are still going to maintain their current districts in the toss up category, but 13th district can still flip. 9th district, that can definitely still flip. But just given the candidates and Republicans aren't putting up juggernauts of their own, and Democrats, they have juggernauts in these seats and are likely to maintain their status, but it's definitely going to be a lot closer. Don't be shocked if there's a surprise flip in the 9th or 13th district, but the 1st district is kind of long gone. Republicans shouldn't focus on that. So Oklahoma, we got here, no change needed. Oregon, Republicans might actually lose the seat, so Democrats are going to gain it. And it's not going to be that by too big of a margin, but Democrats are still going to gain the 5th district. Next state we got is Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania, Republicans have actually made pretty good gains in northern Pennsylvania, and I think they will actually have a pretty good night in Pennsylvania, especially in the House districts. And they'll gain the 8th and 7th district, which helps them secure a majority in the state. And just because of the down ballot effects and getting out the Republican Trump base, it's definitely going to help them in a lot of these states and especially these two districts. So next we got all right. So next state we got is Maryland, no change. South Carolina, no change. South Dakota, obviously no change. Tennessee, no change. Texas, no change. Utah, no change. Vermont, none. Virginia, none. Washington, Republicans are actually going to retake the 3rd district. Definitely a lot more Republican favorable, and trends there have definitely helped. Democrats don't have the best candidates, kind of going to ruin them. Wisconsin, that's also going to stay the same. And then Wyoming, obviously going to stay the same. So Republicans get 227 to 208, and they actually expand on their majority. It's still relatively similar to 2022, but definitely a lot better. You definitely got a lot more security. And Republicans, they don't even need to have a great night in the presidential election to still maintain a majority because Republicans definitely have a lot more favorable map. They just have a lot better odds of retaining the House than Democrats do of taking the House back. And couple that with the Senate, really you only need to focus on the presidential election because if you focus on that, you got a Republican trifecta of the House, Senate, and presidency, and you can get a ton of stuff done if you do that. But you gotta get out the vote. If you don't get out the vote, you're not gonna have stuff like this. And even if the odds are incredibly in your favor, well, it doesn't matter if you don't get people out to vote. So, anyways, what do you think about the map? Is there anything that you would change? If there is, leave them comments below. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.